So I would love for you to kind of share with our listeners just like your entrepreneurial journey, like how you got to where you are, your story a little bit, just so they kind of have some insight into who you are and what you do.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So there's so many stories, right, that carry us to where we are today. So it's a funny question, like what is my specifically my entrepreneurial story?
Mhm.
And well, I've been a coach for 18 years, over 18 years now, which is so funny to say out loud. I'm like, I don't know how that's possible, but that's the truth. And I started as a personal trainer 18 years ago. I kind of stumbled into it. Someone asked me, I was there all the time working out, and they're like, "Why don't you just teach people how to do this? You clearly know what you're doing." So I did, and for several years, I worked at various gyms under someone else's brand. And I mean, you've been there, right? You work in a gym, and you have to sell. You have to learn how to sell your services. You develop your coaching and all of that. And I that's really kind of to me where it started. I learned about how to build a business within someone else's business. um and over the course of those 18 years, there was about a decade worth of time where I was dealing with some pretty severe health issues. And when that really started to take its toll on me, my shift from, athletic training went towards health, like really getting into, um, you know, how do we get, like, why do we develop chronic illness? Why do we develop chronic pain? And how do we heal? And certainly, like, when we make those pivots in our coaching, and we attract different clients. And so as my like personal evolution shifted, so did my approach in my coaching. I started to look at both athletic performance and just, performance in life, what matched with how do we support our vitality? How do we support our health and healing? And the interesting thing that I found that was really became a guiding light in what I do now is when we focus so heavily on what is wrong, when we focus so heavily on the wound, we don't create space for healing
Mm.
at all, right? It just becomes kind of another struggle. And that's really what I lived for so many years was I focused so hard on healing, and with this like thought process in my head of like, okay, I'm going to try this today and hopefully tomorrow I'll feel better. I hope tomorrow I'll feel better. And I lived with this hope that tomorrow would feel better. And I just lived in that groundhog day, that cycle. And it was when I everything shifted when I started to understand that to heal, I needed to focus on something bigger than what was wrong. I needed to connect with myself and connect with that part of me that had a bigger vision than just getting better. And the catalyst and all that, the thing that got me to even think that way was meditation and breath work. I was so consumed with anxiety and depression at a certain point because I was so seemingly off my path, that one day I just closed my eyes and just took a couple breaths slow and through my nose and out, and I just felt my whole system, my whole body and my mind just stabilize. And I noticed that the more that I practiced that, the more I started to see my life in a different way, and what I wanted out of life itself. And what I was ultimately learning was this practice of what's called brain heart cohesion. And
Mm.
when we start to manipulate the breath, slow the breath, calm the mind, we can start to generate this cohesion and this balance between our brain and our heart, in which the frequency of our brain matches the frequency of our heart. And when we drop into that space, what we're actually dropping into is not just our imagination, but our intuition.
Mm.
We're aligning our heart with our mind up, and we're sending vision and clarity and details of our desires up to our brain to see. And so what that gave me was my purpose, which
Mm.
was number one, my desire was to be full of vitality and continue to coach and build a successful business around this,
Yeah.
which was guiding other people who desired to build something greater out of their life, but were struggling and feeling stuck. And
Mm,
so my entrepreneurial journey kind of landed me here, in which I teach, I coach, and I build, different products which all help people reconnect with themselves, balance their nervous systems, and connect with that vision of what is it that I'm here on this planet to create, to offer, to experience, and then how do I actually implement it and create it in this world? And that's my freaking greatest joy in the world.
yeah. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. It's been, I mean, for me, just being able to watch you kind of step into that role has been so amazing. And, just hearing about some of the stuff that you've been doing, and how powerful that's been for people. I think a lot of people, when they hear breath work or meditation, they kind of get like a little bit turned off. And I can even like admit that a little bit for myself. Um, but it sounds like what you're doing is so much more than that. Like, it's so much deeper than that. And you're able to kind of give your clients a little bit more of like an action plan to be able to help them heal themselves in a way.
Yeah, I mean, my belief that I grabbed from someplace else at one point
Mm,
in my life was our body has an innate capacity to heal.
yeah.
It has an innate capacity to heal, and our role as humans with our our we have this, what do they call it, like we have this meat suit that we get to take care of for the course of our life.
Mm,
The opportunity is to create an environment so that our body can do what it knows how to do.
right.
And breath work is such a powerful tool to
Mm.
create an environment for the body to not only heal but perform at the highest level.
And that's that keyword performance, right? We all want to perform at our best.
Yeah. What's my highest potential?
Yeah, right. Well, and you work with a lot of business owners yourself, right? Like you work with
Yeah.
these like high performing individuals too.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure, for sure. And it's all about, you know, I think it's overcoming this idea of not just idea, but this framework of toxic productivity to how can I go from being stressed all the time with this pressure on myself and pressure-filled environment of how much can I do in a day and how well can I accomplish it, to turning shifting into how can I optimize my lifestyle? How
Mm,
can I optimize how I think? How can I optimize how I take care of my body so that I can do all of these things more efficiently, feel relatively relaxed from start
yep.
to finish, and can leave my day at the end when I go home ready to go live my life.
Mm,
And that's the thing, that's the distinction of a lot of the clients that I work with, is they come in and there's no life outside of work.
yep.
And there's so much obviously untangling to be done given our like culture and how we perceive um you know what what work is supposed to look like,
Yep.
you know
Productivity, being
product
productive, being
exactly.
successful, right? Like that's one
Yep,
of the first
yep.
things I do with clients sometimes that is I'm like, what is your definition of success? You know?
Such a good question. That's
Like
such a good question.
if and if you're not operating trying to like, you know, figure that out, like you're always going to define success as the way somebody else defines it, not yourself, right?
Yeah, and what's so interesting about that is, you know we ha- one of my favorite things about where we're at in science is
Mm,
that we're getting to this point where science is starting to support what we've known for a long, long time spiritually.
mm,
And, what we've understood spiritually is that if I am not living in alignment with my core truth, with my authenticity,
mm,
then I will be unwell, right? Because if I am living by someone else's values, someone else's beliefs, I am in disconnect from myself and what is true, right?
yep,
What we've started to understand is that there is a nervous system expression of that.
mm,
So if I am living based on someone else's core values, my parents' core values, society's core values and beliefs and how they see success, And that's different than what I ultimately, intrinsically believe is true.
Mm.
My nervous system is going to reflect that as a stress response because that is a deep core conflict.
Yeah, right.
So to heal and to perform at our best, we have to prioritize the self. We have to prioritize our core values, even if they look differently than others. And that's the biggest obstacle that so many of my clients have to, face is their need for rest. They're like, I don't see my coworkers needing the rest the way that I do. And I'm like, yeah, so what? So what? Are
Yeah.
you still going to be able to like what will be different in terms of how you perform and how you feel if you give yourself what you need?
Mm.
And they're like, well,
Yeah. No,
yeah.
for sure, for sure. Speaking of which, like, what has been your biggest mental hurdle that you've had to overcome as an entrepreneur in the role that you're in?
Yeah, it's such a timely question based on what we're talking about because I think being an authentic entrepreneur, it's, we're here to create something that hasn't existed before. We're here to be someone that we've never been before. And there's so much vulnerability in that. And the thing that I've, experienced that I've been getting better with is every time let me go back, part of being an entrepreneur is you have to put yourself out there.
Yep.
Like I don't know a world in which being an entrepreneur and you don't have to do that. And time and again I've done public speaking. I've put out like I've done other podcasts. I've um done crowdfunding and had to put myself out there and ask for money, right?
Yeah.
Like in all the ways that looks like. And I've experienced this like cliff of vulnerability time and time again where I do the thing that requires so much courage, but that's also so authentic. And then I walk away and I've felt so destabilized in my body. I felt so like almost like, using surfing as a example, it's like that idea of, you get up on the board and but you get taken down rather by a wave. It's that feeling of like being underwater and the wave is just tumbling you, tumbling you, tumbling you, and you're just trying to get back to surface and get to land. Like that's what that vulnerability cliff has felt like to me.
Mm,
And so I've had to learn, number one, to expect that. Like that's a known. That every time I put myself out there, I'm gonna feel weird and probably ick for a little while.
yep.
And that's got to be okay.
Yeah.
But that's also when I have to pull on my toolbox that I also teach my clients. And I have to dig into that. And that makes me bounce back super fast.
Yeah. Yeah. I can completely relate to that. I think a lot of people can probably relate to what you're talking about. But that's a great way to put it. That's what it definitely feels like, especially if we're a little bit more introverted or we're not used to putting ourselves out there as much. Um, yeah, I think that when we're feelers, sometimes that can feel really scary. So I totally
Mhm.
get that. So when you're talking about your toolbox and all these practices, like what are some of those routines or practices that you utilize when you are like overcoming those mental hurdles?
Yeah, I mean, specifically to that, I would say time in nature and journaling are my
Yeah.
go-tos when I feel like I've gone beyond a place of where I can stabilize. I need
Mm,
to get outside and let nature literally be my mirror. Like, oh, okay, everything's fine. Like my body will follow nature. Your body will follow nature. And then journaling allows me to fully process out. And like the more that I write, the more that I find that my higher mind
mm,
will start to take over the narrative, whatever that narrative has been that's like you suck and that was terrible and whatever whatever that is going on there. um but yeah, outside of that, I have other practices that can also help. And we've already mentioned meditation and breath work as being my core kind of practices that I utilize.
yeah. Yeah. If you were to define breath work to a 5-year-old, how would you explain it?
hmm It's when you breathe and you're paying attention to how you breathe.
Yeah.
So like to a 10-year-old it would be it's an intentional way of breathing.
Yeah.
Um, to us, to my adult clients, I'll call it's conscious and intentional breathing. Because
Yeah.
if you think about it, we're gonna breathe regardless,
Mm,
but we're not necessarily doing breath work.
yeah.
Breath work is when I'm actually intentionally manipulating how I'm breathing.
Mm, yeah. It's interesting because I think breath work, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's about like breathing the way that we were breathing when we were born or when we're like younger, right? Like with those like deeper belly breaths, like actually getting into like that part of your body. Cause I think a lot of us don't breathe properly, correct?
Yeah, so first, breath work
Okay.
can be aligning with how we used to breathe, as before we were, to your point, deconditioned out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Breathwork has a spectrum of what it is, and that's why, the definition is so general. It's conscious and intentional breathing. So conscious and intentional breathing could be where I'm sitting in my chair, you're sitting in your chair, and we decide to align our bodies nice and tall,
Like we
and
did
we
before the session.
like we did before the session. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. And, we through our nose take a nice slow breath in
Mm,
and let the body expand to receive that breath. And then we intentionally release that breath through our nose or our mouth. And we repeat that practice.
mm,
That's that's over here.
okay.
That's that kind of restorative mindful breathing.
Mm,
We can progress that into, and let me also say that kind of breathing can be deactivating. So the way that I talked about, how destabilized I used to get after putting myself out there, I needed that kind of breathing to bring my nervous system, to bring my brain and my body back into a place of balance.
yeah.
Now, on the other extreme of what breath work can be actually activating,
Mm,
where instead of trying to deactivate our nervous system and bring it back into a rest and relaxation state, we're actually trying to bring it into an activated quote unquote fight or flight state.
mm,
And what's different about that in terms of how we breathe is typically we'll breathe in through our mouth. So we'll do like a circular breathing pattern. If you've heard of like Wim Hof, like that's an example of,
mm,
of that other spectrum where we're pulling the breath up still from the
mm.
belly, and then we're letting it drop off in that version of it.
Yeah.
Um, were you gonna ask a question? Should I? Because I could just keep going with
I
this.
know. No, this is like so because I think like people have this one track mind when it comes to these things. And I think it's so important to educate people on like there's such a spectrum of what breath work actually is, right? So
And the
yeah, I
function
just
it
kind of wanted
serves.
to, what'd you say?
And the function it serves.
And the function, right.
Mhm.
So yeah, I just kind of wanted to like bring that back as far as like utilizing that for entrepreneurs or people that are, in that high performing area. What breath work is have you seen to be as like the most effective mode, or have all of them kind of had some sort of effectiveness?
Yeah, so what I love about breath work is that it literally can sit in a toolbox by itself
Mm,
because it has so many different functions. So let's kind of start from the end and work our way back. So let's say, you know, this entrepreneur, long day, long day, lots of output, lots of creating, collaborating, being out in the world, having conversations, a lot of, deep focus work. It's a long day. And what happens is, right, we put all that work in, we almost can't come down from it.
mm,
So, what can be of service at that point is using that breath work that we talked about first,
mm,
which is that slow breathing in through the nose and extending the exhale out.
mm,
Because why? Nose is connected to our rest and digest nervous system, Extending the exhale out long slows the heart down,
Mm,
right? So when we breathe in, heart speeds up. When I breathe out, my heart slows down. So if we emphasize at the end of the day, slow breaths in through the nose and long breaths out, we're going to be able to decompress the mind and the body that way. Now, another example, let's go to the extreme other direction. Let's say I've got to do some deep work. I've got 2 hours to get this done for a deadline, right? And my mind's all over the place, and it's all over the place because I know I have all these other things to do. So what we can do is, instead of bringing our, like, just being stressed and bringing ourselves into this anxious stressful state, we can bring ourselves into a functional hyper focused state
mm,
where we use breath work, for example, like a Wim Hof. If you want to Google what Wim Hof is, you could do 3 rounds of a Wim Hof, 30 circular breaths through the mouth and out with some breath holds. And maybe if there's show notes, we can put in like what to actually do.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But what we do is we activate the nervous system and focus the mind into what is that intention. That intention is to create this curriculum, is to
Mm,
create this module from start to finish. And we just kind of bring our awareness, bring all of our energy and our breath work to this project, so
mm,
that when we finish the breath work, we're here. We're in what needs to get done. We're focused. We're in our body. We have that 2 hour chunk. We get to the 2 hour chunk, and then we restore. We
mm,
come back to our diaphragmatic breath. We create a transition before we go into the next thing. We close that container.
mm.
But what that does is that, if you imagine, it's like it becomes a broom. It says, okay, this is the space I'm going to work in right now. And right now, prior to breath work, I've got all this other stuff on my desk. I'm going to take my broom with my breath work and I'm just going to move everything out of the way but this one thing that I need to get done and get done really well. I create the space for that. And then at the end, like I said, we do a deactivating breath to create a transition to come out.
Ah, I love
Um,
that.
yeah.
Wow, thank you so much for explaining that, because I think a lot of people don't know how it works, and they just kind of dismiss it. So that's amazing.
Mm.
And I'm learning something now too. Okay, so to kind of wrap it up just a little bit,
Mm.
if you could give your younger self, the one that's like just starting out in their entrepreneurial journey,
Mhm.
advice or any kind of insights, what would it be?
Yeah, I would give the advice to focus on learning,
Mm,
the perspective of learning. That there's no every opportunity, whether I succeed, whether I fall on my face, I'm gonna learn something.
mm,
I'm this life of being an entrepreneur is truly for a learner, in my opinion. And I think, as my younger self, I think I was so focused on what I wanted everything to look like that I stumbled so much along the way and struggled mentally because I wasn't where I wanted to be. But by dialing into the point is the process, and the point will always be the process. And learning to love the process and what I'm learning in the process. If I can't love that, then I need to find a new a new way of creating a life for myself.
yeah.
But yeah, my sentiment is, keep learning.
Ah, I
Be
love
in that
that.
space.
I think that's why you and I just click. I'm always willing to like learn something from you. Like, I think, like everything that you're doing right now is amazing, and you've been helping so many people, and you've taught me so much about what you do, and it's helped give me insight into some of what my clients are going through and what I can suggest to them. So, I really appreciate you.
Yeah, I mean, this is the other why, right? The learning is we learn together. We
Yeah.
take pieces of what each other is doing and we grow that in our own garden, and then we report back and
Yeah.
then collaborate some more. It's the best.
Yeah. And like, who would have thought little us when we were like, what, 22, 23,
I think I was
doing what we're
25.
doing now?
I think I was 25. No, wait. No. I think I was like, yeah, maybe
You were like, yeah, you were a little bit older, but
24. I think I was
yeah, I was
24.
gonna say, like, we weren't that far apart. But
No.
yeah, like we were personal training in a gym, like who would have
Yeah.
thunk?
Yeah. No,
But,
that's what I love about this is like 15 years later, I love the idea of, I wonder what 15 years from now will be like.
oh, I love that. I love
Hmm.
that. Let's keep recreating that or creating that vision for sure.
I know.
Um, well, I appreciate you, Brenna. Thank you so much. This was so helpful and so insightful. And I will put that stuff in the show notes if you want to send it to me. If people want
Yeah.
to find you or find out more about what you do, where can they find you?
So my website is alphawavewellness.com. So you can learn about more about my background and what I'm up to and what I have to offer. And then you can find me on Instagram. Brenna.alphawave is probably the
Sweet.
best place to go.
Yeah, follow Brenna on Instagram because she's got some really cool stuff on there. Um, but yeah, thank you so much. And for all you listeners out there, appreciate you tuning in, and I'll see y'all next time.